just gotten over, so I'm still not 100%. So if it cracks a little bit and it's raspy, please forgive me. Or if I start coughing, I can feel the
Should
voice
you have
changing.
some hot tea by your
I just
side?
did. I just had some, thank you. Yeah.
Okay, Daniel, when you're ready.
She's looking
Okay. Cool. Okay, so thank you all for joining this meeting tonight. So this is the second lecture service, lecture series in collaboration with the school. Last time I talked quite a bit about because Freda is presenting. But then for this talk, I'm going to let Freda introduce Open Heart and then April will speak.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thanks and welcome, everybody. As Daniel said, this is the second in our lecture series. Our goal is to kind of bring back the old-fashioned in-person lecture. I think after 3 years, we probably have enough of online material. And it's kind of nice to come together, to meet other like-minded people, to hear from someone who's very knowledgeable, be able to ask some questions live, and to really enhance our own spiritual, kind of nurture our own spiritual self and well-being. So Open Heart is a school as well, and we're in partnership with the Toronto Theosophical Society for this lecture series. So Open Heart is a place where anybody can come who is perhaps new to the spiritual path or simply wanting more attention, personal attention. Maybe they've been learning online and they'd like to learn from a real live teacher. So it's a place where you can come and learn spirituality in a very kind of low-key, comfortable way. We have a discussion group that meets every Monday. Saunders coming to our discussion group. And we also have individual and group classes for people who are a little more interested in where they're moving along the spiritual path a little more quickly. So today I'm really delighted to present one of my teachers, which is Eva Smith. I studied with her at the Old Center for Esoteric Studies. And Eva is a remarkable teacher. Her knowledge of esotericism is worldwide and deep. So ask her any question about anything, and she can probably give you an answer. So that's the joy of studying with Eva. She's an excellent astrologer, and her knowledge of astrology is amazing, as well as the rays. I think one of Eva's great gifts is she can teach the rays to people who've never heard of what a ray is and make it really clear and simple and understandable. So today she's going to talk about the shadow, which is also a very interesting topic. Do you want me to say anything more, Eva?
No, I just want to live up to it.
She can totally live up to it without further ado. Eva Smith. And thank you.
Okay, so we start. The shadow. So everybody knows what a shadow is. And it refers to the dark side of our psyche aspects of ourselves. And that things that we've split off, what things that we've rejected, that we've denied ourselves. Sit over there. Just sit over there so I can.
Sure.
Yeah, I'd like to know that you're there instead of behind.
Sure.
Please, thank you. Good. Yes, I can. But I can't sit there. I want to see your faces. You know, and not just see the machine. Okay, so. So what we do with those parts that we reject within ourselves, we project them onto others. You will find that I will be repeating concepts quite a bit in this talk. Why? So that I drum it into your head, right? So it'll be over and over, just a different way of saying the same kind of thing. So,
You mean like Alice Bailey or G.K.
yeah, I'm constantly always referring to the same thing over and over. So everything that the ego has refused to associate with within itself is that part, and that we do not notice. We see it in other people. So whether it's aggression, or whether it's instincts, or whether it's cowardice, whatever we see in others, we have to really look within ourselves. And I'll cover that more and more. So like I said, it refers to the dark side of the psyche. Yeah, I pretty well covered a lot of this in what I said. everything that the ego has refused to associate with itself but it can see and notice in other people, such things as, I'll kind of talk a little bit about it, whether it be sexuality, spontaneity, aggression, enthusiasm, love for material possessions. These are all part of what we call the shadow. Another thing that we know about the shadow that the dictionary says is the repressed, unconscious. Why is it called repressed? Because we push it down, we press it down and out of our awareness. Therefore, it is unconscious and we're not aware of it. So the word repressed is actually a pretty good word to describe it. It's not part of our conscious self-image. And so it's the things that we've spent most of our lives denying. Whether it's our dark thoughts, whether it's our moods, which we feel guilty about, or shame. So as I go along, if there are any questions or if I've gone too fast, please let me know. If you don't see it or own your own shadow, it does not simply go away. How does the shadows get leaked within ourselves? How we leak them out through sarcasm, through slips of the tongue, through our dreams, through our reactions. We project them onto others. They're unhealthy, they really are. So via projections, we attribute to others all our evil and inferior qualities that we don't want to admit to ourselves. We create the illusion that they don't belong to us. It's them, not us. It's their fault. They're the ones that are like that, not us. We don't even see it within us. When it arises and we have a little inkling, we start to feel a little bit anxious and disgusted. So, for example, if you repress anger, you may find you're always ending up dealing with angry people. If you don't own your emotions, you may find emotional people trigger you. As without, so within. Whatever we judge or condemn within ourselves is ultimately a disowned or a rejected part of ourselves. In the midst of projection, it appears as though we are seeing the other person, but in reality, we are seeing the hidden aspect of ourselves. We unconsciously transfer all those qualities that we don't like within ourselves onto others. We think it's them. We don't claim them as ourselves. And that is the whole key. We're not aware, we're unconscious, we don't see all of those negative aspects within ourselves. There's a fear about opening up a can of worms. There's a fear about looking deep within ourselves. Why? To avoid shame or embarrassment that might accompany admitting our mistakes. So usually we don't admit it to others, but we don't admit it to ourselves. We don't admit it that we have these horrible thoughts or feelings or guilt. We don't want to admit it because it's a horrible feeling when you suddenly recognize this within yourself, things that you weren't aware of. We're just talking about this today with another group, that once you become aware of things that you've not known, all of a sudden it's such a shock to the system, and we don't want to own it. So if we do admit, we'll be too exposed. So therefore there's the fear of admitting it to ourselves. So all of these is part of the psyche, it's part of the way we live through everyday life. But what do we have to do? We have to uncover and own and embrace all of who we are. The good, the bad, the ugly, the light and the dark, the selfish, the selfless, the honest and dishonest parts of our personality. That is the key, to own it and to recognize, okay, I don't think any of us think we're perfect, but to be able to own some of those dark things once you become aware of them. So here's a Carl Jung's quote. A man who is unconscious of himself acts in a blind, instinctive way, and is in addition fooled by all the illusions that arise when he sees everything that he is not conscious of in himself coming to meet him from the outside as projections upon his neighbor. Basically, he's saying the very same thing we just talked about. So when we perceive a moral deficiency in others, we can be sure that there is a similar inferiority within ourselves. I remember years ago, I used to say, if you don't like something that someone does, look within yourself. And I remember responses from friends and family saying, there's no way, I always like to be early and on time, and I can't stand it when that person is late. I said, well, look within yourself, but I'm not like that. The other person is late, not me. So there's something about that one needs to look within themselves. Why do they not like that in other people? Why can't they not accept that? And there's a whole thing of not judging oneself and not judging other people that goes along with all of this. How does the shadow gain power? By keeping secrets from yourself and from others. What is a secret? A secret is something that's hidden, something that isn't obvious. That's what secrets are. It's deliberate deception, fear of exposing who you are, and conditioning by a dysfunctional family, usually, or by harboring guilt and shame. I know I've said this already before, I'm repeating myself, I realize that. Judgment, making others wrong, judging against yourself, like self-judgment. Why do we self-judge? Fear of failure, a sense of victimization, and because we lack of confidence. Self-judgment. One of the big mistakes that most spiritual traditions make is to assume that practices such as meditation can transform that individual. It can allow those negative qualities within ourselves to just disappear because we know how to meditate or because we have positive thoughts. But by having them buried and not being conscious, all the meditation that we're doing, all the positive thoughts that we have does not change that. It's still there. It has to surface. We have to become aware of that. Awareness is the key in most spiritual practices. Becoming aware of who you are. Know thyself. You've heard that. Know thyself. That's so important. It means knowing, truly knowing who you are and what you are. There's another quote here from Carl. The shadow is a moral problem that challenges the whole ego personality. For no one can become conscious of the shadow without considerable moral effort. Sitting in meditation and listening to beautiful music ain't gonna do it. So they call it shadow work. There's a lot of programs that deal with shadow work. I remember doing one on astrology. It had to do with shadow through astrology and recognizing it through our charts and knowing how to see that in other charts. So the purpose of shadow work is to undo this, repress the part of us that we push down, and to reintegrate this shadow to improve our psychological health as well as our therapy. The challenge, what's the challenge here, is to find the value and to bring the light of forgiveness and compassion to these shadow aspects. So you recognize something within yourself that you didn't even know was there. And you recognize that and you feel awful about it. So how do you deal with that? First of all, you forgive yourself. You forgive those parts within yourself that you don't like. And when you do that, it's amazing how you become aware and you try to, every time you see that within yourself, you handle it a little bit differently and a little bit differently until eventually it's not there anymore. It's amazing how it works. If you do work on your shadow aspects, it clears it up so it frees you up. Any questions so far?
Are you going to be talking about trauma at some point?
Not really, but trauma is very similar, you know, usually we vary a lot of our traumas and conditions associated with trauma. And if we don't handle them, I know that people who have had accidents and there's trauma with that, and then they end up with body parts that hurt. If they don't deal with that hurt or that part of the body that has been hurt keeps coming back all the time, that hurt. You've got to work all of that out of your system, and there are therapists that do that. That's on a physical level. Then there's the emotional part. Then there's the mental part, you know, psychological part.
The emotional part, the physical part in the right way.
Right.
And there are multiple right ways of doing it, depends on the person.
Exactly.
Then oftentimes the physical will take care of it.
That's right. But the most common way that people deal with it is they deal with the physical injury, because that's what we relate to. Most of humanity relates to the physical form first.
Question. I think the most difficult thing is to bring the awareness, because it's hidden.
Exactly.
Any suggestion?
If you ask and you shall receive. If you want to become aware, you will become aware because you've set the intention. You set the intention, and it's amazing how that works. If you really want to become more conscious and more aware, you tell yourself, I really want to become more aware. And you'll get the insights, little hints here and there, and before you know it, you do become more aware. You'll see all of a sudden an action. You go, that is da 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 da. But you have to set the intention that you want to, that you're ready for this. Most people are not.
Yeah.
It's like a can of worms. Most people don't want to go there.
Yeah. Because based on my experience, it's so easy for me to find people projection. Certain people behave in a certain way, even certain people using a certain way. And then they're using the same exact thing to project to other people. He's that.
Exactly.
But then this is in a work setting, very strong. But then it's me observing other people. Like if I want to know my own blind spot, then I start with setting up the intention. That's right. Yeah. That's right. Any other tips?
Let's start with that. You know, let's start with wanting to understand yourself better, wanting to know yourself better. So you set the intention, and you really ask for that. You're asking for that, and sometimes you get what you ask for. Sometimes you're sorry that you get what you ask for.
We could ask for gently.
There's different types of trauma. There's physical trauma, which I think we can talk about, but psychological trauma is more what I'm talking about. How do you, with someone that doesn't want to face that trauma because it was so overwhelming, and they're really kind of like, I know someone that's trying to deal with their trauma, but they're doing it kind of like they're tiptoeing around it, and they're choosing kind of the easy ways out. You know what I mean? Like avoiding it, saying, I just want to get on with my life. They're trying to leave it behind, but I'm trying to tell them that it lingers. It's still there.
Absolutely.
Right? So how do you help someone that doesn't want to face it?
They have to be ready.
Yeah, it's on their own time.
They have to be ready.
Oh.
It's about timing.
And it's their time.
It's their time, exactly. You want it for them more than they want it for
Right.
themselves. And that's what happens with many parents. They want it for their children. The children don't necessarily want what the parents want to, hand off. I think I covered that. didn't I?
Yeah, you did.
Okay, another one of my colleagues. It's amazing how he was into this material. And the interesting thing that the shadow is what I think he said, it's hidden. And what does the word esoteric mean? It's hidden. Esoteric is that which is hidden. So in many respects, this whole area about the shadow is an esoteric subject. It's hidden from our awareness. So he observed that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. right? You say, it was meant to be, it was meant to be, this is my fate. But that's because you kind of either accept that this is the way life is. It doesn't mean that you're really conscious of your actions or what is going on. God wanted this to happen for you, you know? So by getting to know your shadow and clearing it up, it frees up energy that usually camouflages the undesirable aspects of ourselves from ourselves, right? When you can free up that energy, it can actually be used for growth and for transformation. Because all of a sudden, there's this whole new approach to changing the way you are. And change is it's a bugaboo word. A lot of people are afraid of change because change means you've got to put aside your usual way of doing things. And people don't feel comfortable with that. They're afraid of that. Oh, what if I have to give this up or I have to give that up? So change is fearful. And when you get to know an aspect of yourself that wasn't there before or that was hidden, it has to bring change. That's what there's a very interesting formula that DK taught us, and it's called the Ackley process. A is when you reach a certain alignment, then
sorry, the what?
Ackley, those are that's a those, it's just initials for what they represent. Ackley is alignment. Once you're aligned, all of a sudden the light shines on something, right? So AC. No, I'm sorry. Alignment, and then there's a crisis that happens. Usually there's a crisis that happens, whether it's a trauma, whether it's an accident, whether there's a death in the family, whether it's losing a job, whatever, there's a crisis. And when you stew in that crisis and you stew it and you stew it, it's a horrible time to be in that. Then all of a sudden light will shine on us. When light shines, it's just on that immediate thing. And there's still shadows on the side, but the light shines on the crisis. And then ACL, then there is some kind of a revelation or a realization. That's the R. What the hardest part here is integrating, which is the I. Integrating what you just realized, what has been revealed to you. Because most people do not integrate it. They get the insight and then they just leave it. And then they move on in their usual way. So in order to change, you have to integrate the insights, and we all get insights. We all do. You know, we all get an insight of something. What do we do with that?
So, can I just go back? You said the first is the alignment. So
Right,
can
you're
you
suddenly
explain that? I mean, I know what alignment is, but do you have, are you saying the person needs to be out of alignment, in alignment?
It doesn't matter. Alignment is just part of the
So it's
formula. You are all of a sudden ready. It's a certain kind of readiness and alignment. Another way of saying it. These are just DK's way of saying it. And
You're willing to look at your own problem. You're aligned, you see a problem, recognize the problem.
well, not yet. First of all, you're aligned, you're ready, but then something happens to make it possible for you to understand it more. And that's when the crisis sets in. Any kind of crisis. You know, like you step off the curb and you fall and you break your leg. Or you end up in an argument with somebody and then you ask yourself, now why did that happen? If you even want to understand it, rather than blaming the other person for starting the argument, right? So then you have this crisis, and what doesn't matter what the crisis is on any level, a crisis is a crisis. And then when you stew in that crisis, it's an uncomfortable place to be. We all know that. Every crisis, I wish I was out of this crisis, right? Then suddenly the light shines in. The light always shines in. And it reveals something. As it could be as a very simple little thing, but it reveals something. And so then, what do you do with that revelation? What do you do with what you realize? So it's revelation, realization, and then what do you do with it? That's the key. What do you do with what you just have come to know about yourself? Because usually crisis brings about growth. We've all heard that, right? So by denying those parts of ourselves that we don't even know about, by denying the shadow, it feels it. It doesn't allow you to blossom. It doesn't allow you to really grow. By actually working with the shadow, our hidden emotions and our life draining beliefs. So because this will break up your belief system, it brings it into light or into our consciousness, which is just another way of saying our awareness. And it will transform the way we see ourselves. It provided you are prepared to make the alterations and the changes that are necessary when you do recognize that. And then you truly are free. At least with that particular thing. So here we have Chiron. Chiron was known as the guide or the teacher. And here he's uncovering and teaching a student. Chiron is a
Central.
that's right. He was a centaur that was wounded in his ankle, and it never healed. He got like an arrow in there. It never healed, and so he dealt with that for the longest time. And then when he finally healed himself, he was able to then heal and help other people because of what he had learned as a result of that. So the story goes. So here he is a wonderful teacher and helps you uncover the hidden within yourself. So the job for us is to uncover it. Chiron usually represents, wherever you look at Chiron in your chart, it represents where our wounds are. And because we can recognize those wounds, we can recognize where we have been hurt. And if we can accept that and understand that, then we can help others in that same area. Because we understand what it's like. We've suffered there. We've been wounded there. Have you guys heard of the dweller on the threshold? Is that an expression you guys are familiar with? Okay, so here we're going to talk a little bit about the difference between the dweller is the sum total of all characters, of all of who you are, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Essentially, it's the personality. It's full and prior to redemption and union with the soul. So that's the dweller on the threshold. It's the sum total of the lower nature. So all the lower nature, all the lunar nature, what we call lunar nature, the physical forces, the vital energy, which is your etheric, the astral and mental forces, that you understand, your vices, your limitations, which are of the personality. And why am I putting a negative spin on all of this? Because it's the personality that doesn't allow the soul to really integrate and to infuse into ourselves. The personality creates its own obstacles because it doesn't want to change, doesn't want to bring in the lighter part, the soul, the love, the will of the soul. So it stays stuck in its own way. And even the good parts of the personality, we're so identified with it. We think we're terrific with whatever that good part is. I'm a great cook, right? And it doesn't matter what anybody says, I know I'm a great cook. Or other aspects of ourselves, they stand in the way of really truly being the best that we can be, because it becomes what we call a glamour. I don't know if you're familiar with that expression. It becomes a glamour. So the good becomes the glamour, and the negative becomes the glamour. So the dweller is all of that, whereas the shadow is not that. The shadow is the hidden, the parts that we're not aware of. This includes the entire personality, the dweller. And eventually, when the dweller meets the soul and the right time comes, who wins? Of course. And that's usually the third, fourth initiation. We're talking about initiations. In the meantime, you're constantly working on elevating that personality.
But it's very difficult for the person because they have to leave behind what they have accumulated for all of their lifetimes.
The identification with those things, right?
Identification.
Right. The good and the bad.
The good and the bad.
That's right.
I'm sure it's more difficult to part with the good and the bad.
Exactly, and that's why, and that's what makes it so hard, because there is a certain kind of attachment to the good, you know? You don't wanna-
Absolutely.
Yeah. And you identify with it.
It's like you're giving up all your worldly goods,
That's
but it's
right.
not goods, it's all encompassing.
That's right, absolutely, very good.
You know, this whole thing of leaving everything behind, it makes me think of that saying of Jesus, which I think has been really misunderstood, where he says, those who can't leave husband, wife, children, blah, 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 blah behind, and following is not my disciple.
That's right.
And so people looked at it and thought, well, you know, this is like a cult. You know what I mean? Like it's lean towards that. But then maybe that's what he meant.
That was attributed to him.
Right.
We don't know what he actually
Well,
said.
it's someone else's memory.
Well, you know, years and years ago, I remember having this conversation with my husband. And I don't know what brought it on, but I said to him, well, my spiritual life is the most important thing in my life. I said, more so than our marriage? I got it at the time and I said, yeah. Well, he was so offended. It took a long, long time
I
for
remember,
him to understand. I'm not even sure he ever
I
understood it.
remember you talking about it.
Remember that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so he either put it aside and didn't address it in his own consciousness, or didn't, or
In
accepted it.
cases, the Bailey says the same thing,
Yeah,
that it's a, we need to identify, if you will, from our family and our friends, because in order to serve humanity as a whole,
right.
the greater good.
It doesn't mean we don't care, and it doesn't mean we don't have a relationship. It means that we're not that attached anymore, that we can
Right.
stand free on our, in our own space and who we are. Does
So
that make
there's
sense?
not the emotional pull of that,
Yeah.
of that.
Okay, so I think I did that. So why work with the shadow? I think we already know all that. Here's another Carl Jung. I did a lot of Carl Jung stuff for this. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. So working with light and bringing in all the music and all that light and making, you know, surrounding yourself with light and whatever the practice people are in does not really do it. It doesn't. Got to become conscious, become aware. And the goal is to bring the unconscious aspect of our shadow into our consciousness, to harmonize, to uplift them so that they can become integrated into a harmonious whole. Excuse me. Okay, so how do you uplift? How do you uplift and harmonize those aspects of yourself that you don't like? How would you think that you uplift and harmonize that?
By understanding them in their proper place.
Right, that's one way you understand that. Number two, okay, you envelop that with love.
So that's late, so that's.
Okay, that's number two. Number three,
You forgive it.
that's right, forgive it. That's number
You
three.
don't look at it on the shame and
That's
shame
right.
about it.
That's
So the scale of emotions, there's about 20 emotions and shame is the lowest.
That's right, it is. And accepting, accept that this is who I am, or this is how I was. I'm not going to be like that anymore. But accepting, you know, not denying and rejecting and pushing it down, suppressing it, right? Okay. So anyway, they can become integrated into the whole of who you are. So you tap into all your soul, your experiences of light and love and a power of the soul. You understand that expression, don't you? The light, the love, and the power of the soul, because all of those are very, very much who and what the soul is. The soul is light, the soul is love, and the soul is got power and will. And there's a difference between personality will and soul will. Okay, the will of the personality is self-serving. The will of the soul, it isn't so much about self-serving; it's to serve a greater whole. It's still will. Will doesn't change. The energy of will is will. It doesn't change. It's got another race. It's got a first-rate component to it. It's very directed. It's very powerful. It doesn't change. It's how it's used. What is the motive behind that? To what end? Shadow work is the path of the heart warrior. Everyone is complete and whole in their deepest level. As you follow the spiritual path and see yourself more completely, you will have compassion for your faults. And that's what forgiveness is, an understanding and accepting. And it will lead to complete self-acceptance. You'll accept yourself with all those faults. It's amazing. I think back to as a kid, and I could not own up to things when I was younger. I remember that so clearly. And let's say I had spilled something or whether, I would never say it was my fault. I'm sorry, I did it. I just ignored that. Like I wouldn't own that because I didn't want to get yelled at. I didn't want to get blamed. So it just starts as a child, you know. It doesn't take, you know, much wisdom to realize that it's part of our everyday way of living, and depending on the person will depend how we accept and admit these things to ourselves. This shadow part of us, it exists to teach us and to guide us, believe it or not. And so again, we have to embrace aspects of ourselves, both the positive and the negative, that we are afraid of. The shadow parts, believe it or not, holds gifts. Redeeming this unacknowledged parts brings wholeness to who we are. You know? It's like integrating all of it, harmonizing all of it, accepting all of it, and it makes us whole. It's a very difficult concept for most people to get, that we have to love and forgive the negative aspects as opposed to death to them. You know, death is not the answer. You don't kill this out and kill that out. I remember those words. By getting to know your shadow and clearing it up, it frees up energy that usually camouflages those undesirable aspects from ourselves. And so again, I'm repeating myself, I know that this energy can be used for growth and transportation. But it will transport
Well,
you.
it is true.
Yeah.
both sounds and counts.
It will transport you. There are some of our emotions and some of our shadows are life draining because they have to do with our belief systems. And we're living right now at a time when our belief systems are being shattered all the time. Have you noticed that? I mean, I don't want to get too political, but have you noticed how our belief systems are being shattered? Things are not what we thought they were. We have to try to understand what's going on in the world right now. Once we do, and we can drop these belief systems, it does free us up a little bit instead of being part of the masses and part of the, what Desmond, what is this, Desmond,
What's he called?
what it calls it. There's an expression. It's the masses that are so psychologically duped that they can't remember the expression.
No, I can't either.
Anyway, are you ready to dive deeper? Then how to redeem the shadow. You've already covered this. You knew all the answers to this. So this is going to be easy for you. One, acknowledge your shadow. First thing is recognize and acknowledge it. This is things about me. Then embrace and forgive your shadow. Turn an unwanted obstacle into your friend now. Ask yourself, what conditions are giving rise to the shadow? Why do I behave the way I do? What is causing me to react this way? What is causing me to feel this way? You know, ask yourself. Keep asking yourself. It's a way of inviting a change within yourself, because it's going to open you up to see, to understand, to use your word before. So, what conditions give rise to the shadow? Stress, peer pressure, passivity, dehumanizing conditions, which we are seeing right now all over the world right now, versus us versus them mentally. The vaccinated against the unvaccinated against the vaccinated, us versus them, creating polarities, creating enemies. And you know what? The world reacted this way. Share your feelings with someone you trust, a therapist, a trusted friend, a good listener. a counselor, a confidant, a teacher, a spiritual leader. If you go churchgoer, you know, a minister or whatever, you just with someone you trust. There's a few more here. Include a physical component like body work, energy release, yogic breathing, or hands-on healing, Reiki or whatever else, massage you, because it's even for releasing some of those pent-up pressures in the body. To change the collective, which I'd love to see the collective change yourself. Projecting and judging them as evildoers only increases the shadow's power. So practice meditation in order to experience pure consciousness, which is beyond the shadow. It's just one tool that we have in our toolbox. So here's the formula. It's redemption, which leads into integration and synthesis. So first is the recognition. So this is like taking part of the alchemy process and just using the important parts that apply here. So first is recognition, become aware of that which is hidden. Awareness leads to acceptance about yourself. We've covered all of this already. You guys are by now very smart. When you see wholeness beyond the play of light and dark, there's nothing to blame. Don't blame yourself, and you don't blame others, and you don't blame the conditions. Well, you know, this is the way my mother raised me. This is the way I am, you know, or this is the way the society looks at life. We all fall into that. And we integrate, accepting these parts of ourselves, meeting the needs to create a happy, purposeful, and fulfilling life. And then synthesis, once you understand all of that, recognize, accept, integrate it into yourself, then you have synthesis. Of course, that's the fusion of the higher self and the lower self. The higher self and the personality, the soul and the personality, right? That's synthesis. Synthesis is more than unity. It's just a one, right? So you harmonize them to overcome conflict and build their positive traits. You integrate them so that they function as a whole. So this one. Here we go. Synthesize them so that they fuse together, and eventually there is synthesis of personality and soul, which is basically what I just said. Okay. So I think I have a little bit more here on the shadow on a global level. And I'll only go into politics or global things if you guys want me to and ask me. Otherwise, we'll keep it very, very neutral. So.
Can we talk about personal stuff first when we ask questions?
Yes, please do.
So some of us may be required to interface with people who have deep psychological problems.
Okay.
And I can say that for my own person, so I'll give my own personal example because other ones too nebulous. So if someone who I do interact with, because they're in front of me, and they do have, I don't know how this person has or has not addressed the problems, but they've had major trauma in their early years, and they adjust in ways that are extraordinarily dysfunctional, and they take up a lot of space in any kind of large or small social interaction or any kind of interaction, and they dominate, and constantly putting stuff out there that is that hampers ordinary exchange between other people who are around. And I find it, for me, it's a difficult situation to be in. And while my heart goes out to them, I also feel the need to protect myself from a lot that's going on. And I find that there's a lot of verbal pollution that's there that's extremely difficult to know how to deal with. And this person loves to sit next to me.
Attracted to you, eh?
For a number of reasons. No, just what there's a whole panoply of reasons for that.
So what do you think this whole purpose is teaching you?
My biggest problem with it, so that's where I have to go to, because that's where the juice is that we can't, that the rest of us can't interact in a normal kind of way, because there's this whole domination going on and sucking of energy and oxygen up.
Vampiristic. Vampiristic.
Okay.
Yeah. What is
So
it?
what is it teaching me?
Yeah.
I mean, other than compassion and love
Mhm.
and patience,
Mhm.
and to get the hell out of the room. That's what I have to do sometimes. And when advances are made to see me socially, I have to
Protect yourself.
correct.
And what's wrong with that?
That's what I'm asking.
Is there anything wrong with that? If you're aware of how that individual, the reaction you have with that individual, it's not like it's hidden. You're aware.
Yes.
Right? And so you're dealing with
I
that.
have addressed it with the person in the most gentle way when it was appropriate. And that's gone fine.
You know, for me, an expression that has worked, and it's directly from the Bible, and it works a lot with people, because I come across people in all various echelons of life, is forgive them, for they know not what they do. And I use that a lot. And my mother, you know, she's passed away quite a long time ago. She wasn't the nicest person, and I found a way to handle all of this and to live with all of this. I looked at her as a child. How do you get angry at a child who doesn't know any better? And in my mind, it was like, she's a child, she doesn't know any better. And so I kind of accepted, tolerated, forgave her, and there was no animosity and no problems with me and her, because I realized that that's the only way I could live with all of that, you know.
So you forgave her, you
Accepted it, and you know, I just, in my mind, I constantly, this is a child. You don't get angry at a
kept
child.
refocusing. I remember that. You kept refocusing.
That's right. How do you get angry at a kid who doesn't know any better? You just don't, because they don't know any better. Well, that's how I looked at my mom. She doesn't know any better. She can't help herself. She doesn't want to help herself. So you either accept it and you move forward, especially if the person has to be in your life, like my mother. And I had no problem with her. My sibling did, but I didn't.
I remember you handled things well, even when you were, in the stories you told me, even when you were in your late teens.
So, yeah,
Interesting experience that we go with parents sometimes.
Yes.
As parents, they get very aged.
yes.
Yeah, I secondary your
Yeah, my mother ended up
experience.
with dementia.
I went through that also,
Yeah.
taking care of my mother.
My mother ended up with dementia, and she says, your father's like this, and my father says, your mother's like this, you know?
And they were both right.
Sorry.
So you that's
She's right. And so what do? You know, you just do the best you can in the condition that you find yourself. The resentment, the anger, the wishing it was different doesn't change anything. It doesn't help. So what do you do? What do? You find a way to tolerate, to accept, and to move with that, the best way that you know how. But stay conscious as you do that. You know, be aware. This is the way this person is. They can't help themselves. I mean, in a way, you kind of gloss over the situation because you see they can't help themselves. Maybe that's a cop-out for me. I don't know, but it has worked for me. And I kind of look at life that way. You know. Any more personal things before we go into more global? Can't believe I talk about that.
That's okay.
So, astrology, even globally, helps us to understand the conditions going on in the world. So, Pluto, which is a planet that's the furthest away from the sun in our system, and it's a small, but boy, is it deadly, because it is small and it takes a long, long time for it to revolve around the sun. Therefore, it stays in a particular sign, like here in Capricorn, for a long time. You can see here how many years it stayed in Capricorn. And because it doesn't move very much, it has a chance to do its work. Pluto was known as the god of the underworld. And what is the underworld? Hell, right? So it wants to bring that which is hidden, which is in the depths, up to the surface so that we can see it in the light of day. Okay, so that's what Pluto's job is, to bring it up so that we can see it. That's what esotericism is all about. Bring that which is hidden into the light of day. The light of day is the soul. So what the Pluto tears down the past so we may rebuild anew. It brings that which is hidden into the light so it can be dealt with both personally and on a planetary level. So right now in January, it transitioned from being in Capricorn and went into Aquarius. It's going to be in Aquarius for, I don't know, 15, 16, 20 years. I don't know how long it's going to be because each constellation has a particular size or width or whatever you want to call it. But so I don't know how long. I haven't done my homework to look. But Pluto's power, because we get to see what Pluto wants us to see, it will transform our lives, whether it's personal or whether it's globally, in a way by confronting the darkest parts of ourselves and others. So it brought it to light because it was in Capricorn, and Capricorn has to do with structures, has to do with government, has to do with top-down government. And didn't we just go through all of that for all these years? Top-down. Government's giving us mandates. Government's making us do certain things, affecting us socially, affecting us politically. We see all the corruptions because it unveiled all that's going on in the world, not just in Canada, in the States and all over the world. It brought about women's rights, the haves and the have-nots, the racism. It brought about the corruption. That was key.
You mean our ability to see the corruption?
Yes,
Yeah.
it brought
it
up
to the surface.
to the surface. So we saw the corruption in the corporations, in the governments, in any of the top, where there's top-down government, whether it's the structures. In the structures, every step of the way, there is corruption going on. Just like there is in the third world countries, it's happening all over in the West as well. So by seeing all of this and the social order that needs to change, we can overcome these power inequities and these resources by being aware of our shared community. And more there is right now grass level roots that are starting to band together to try to overcome some of the repressing that is going on in the world right now. I didn't say that, did I? Pluto is like a green light. Pluto's transits through Capricorn serve to draw back the curtain until the flaws, the failings, and the destructiveness of our systems. That's another thing. It has to do with systems. Capricorn does. We're so obvious.
I'm a Capricorn, so does this same time frame apply to me?
Absolutely. You were affected by Pluto so much. It allowed things to come to the surface for you to see them. Did you see them? That's only up to you for you to answer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it actually does apply in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Now, Pluto can affect us on all three levels. It can affect us physically. People can end up with boils. They can end up with eruptions, bladder infections, eruptions, anything that has to do with the insides.
That's a really silly question. Why was the dog called?
So people end up with breaking out a lot, or boils, or cysts and stuff like that, because it's like a volcano wanting to erupt. That which is hidden in the volcano wants to come to the surface, and it will erupt. So it can erupt physically. It can erupt emotionally. You find during that period of time, there was a lot of anger. There was a lot of emotional upsets. And mentally too, like it will affect you psychologically. Any of the signs that are on the cardinal cross, which includes Aries, Libra, Capricorn, Aries, Libra, Capricorn, Cancer. Just a minute. Aries, Libra, Capricorn, and
I said
Cancer.
Cancer. I
Yeah.
can hear you. So
Okay,
thank you.
sorry.
So all of them are going to be affected by Pluto because it either squares or trines, and I have my moon in Capricorn. And I remember I had a hard time sometimes with that. Again, it has to do with the degrees and how it affects your particular placement and so on. But this is an important thing for us to be aware of, how Capricorn was so deliberate in making things uncomfortable for us. Very uncomfortable.
So this is from 2000, this Pluto in Capricorn, 2008 to 24.
So now it's just
16 years.
Yeah, it just moved into Aquarius. And what's Aquarius about? Aquarius is about the future. It's going to reveal to us, Aquarius is about, I want to share with the world, for those that are thirsty and want, it's about raising humanity and working as a whole. So very humanitarian, but it's very futuristic, and it wants to do this through invention, through bringing to this is on the highest level, to bringing to man all that instrumentality and all those inventions that will make life easier for humanity. Okay, that is on the highest level. On the lowest level, it's control of the masses. It's bringing this technology to control humanity. It's playing around with technology. There's going to be a lot of technological inventions during the time of Aquarius. In the beginning, it's not going to be for the greater good. It's going to be very selfish. As we move more and more into the, and we're also on another level, we're going into the age of Aquarius, which is 250,000 years. So it's not just 16 years here. So it's the age of Aquarius plus we want Capricorn moving into Aquarius.
Aren't we already in
Pluto?
Pluto?
No, not yet. 2117.
So if there's a 100-year bridge or something?
It's more than that, but yeah, it's about 500 years. So we're leaving behind Pisces and we're moving into Aquarius, and Aquarius is mental. There'll be a lot more mentality as opposed to Pisces, which is emotional. So we have lived through to the Piscean age. You want me to hurry? Yeah. So yeah, I should move on. Sorry. Which was emotional. Right now we're going to go into mental. All right. So Uranus is now in Taurus, and those are the years that it's in. It affects the Earth's resources, the atmosphere, the climate change, because Uranus, it's like electricity. Emphasis on farming and food supply, which is Taurus. We don't want genetically modified stuff. Taurus is also known for finances, so it's emphasis on money, the banks, the hoarding of money, like Panama Papers and the islands and so on. And brings rise to populism and dictatorship. So we see extreme right-wing candidates, once again, on the rise, spending propaganda through social media, slanted news outlets, populist rallies, and cyber hacking. The worst manifestations of Uranus and Taurus can be bigotry, stubbornness, and warmongering. Uranus promotes us to elevate our consciousness and refine our ways. I know I'm rushing. So, Deepak Chopra, Debbie Ford, and Marion Williamson wrote a very, very nice book. And I pulled out of that the part that I wanted to use here. Groups such as nations are made up of individuals. Therefore, it's not surprising that the personality characteristics of its member show up in the collective behavior of the group. And because this becomes like the masses, the group energy gets magnified, whether it's loving or whether it's fearful. Just think of the vaccinated versus the unvaccinated. There's a perfect example of the group energy. The energy of two or more minds thinking in the same way is not just the sum of those two, it increases exponentially. Since all minds are joined, our ability to self-correct has a corrective influence on the entire universe. That's why a group meditation, and they've taken experiments, Lynn McTaggart, thank you. Lynn McTaggart has articulated that in her books, how they've done group experiments and the effect that it's had on peace and on all kinds of things. It has a tremendous amount of strength. So since all minds are joined, and I just said that, so individuals, group meditation is far more powerful than individual meditations, and redeeming the collective communities. Anyway, all acceptance of the various different communities. So value being open rather than trying to suppress differences, whether it's a sexual orientation or whether it's whatever goes on, it's staying open. You don't have to agree with any of that, but just being open and not being big about any of that, homophobic. And anyway, I'm rushing through this, I know. So that's the end of it, guys. So any questions?
That was pretty fast. I'm sorry I rushed you, but that's exactly an hour, so very well done.
Thank you. Okay. Knew I was, I needed to rush to the end, so sorry. Could have talked a little more. Okay. Any questions?
There is certain month that the transaction, the Pluto is going from into Aquarius.
It's already in Aquarius. It went in January.
In January.
And it doesn't go back. So sometimes they'll go in for a while in the retrograde and go back. They did all that at the end of last year. Now it's finally in Aquarius and it's staying there. And it's going back on a month.
No, I think it does go back in November of this year, so.
But we can pretty well assume, and anyone that has anything in living